Welcome back to Adapt AI Group. Today we have another exciting guest speaker. We're excited to jump in and talk about another popular topic that we're kind of seeing right now on rethinking customer engagement, a fresh approach to retention and how we're keeping our clients that we acquire. Today we have the founder and CTO of a company called Abundant. His name is Tarun Sukhani. Introduce yourself and tell us what Abundant is all about.
I'm Tarun Sukhani. I'm the founder and CTO of Abundant. Abundant is an ed tech solutions provider as well as a digital transformation, I guess you could say, assistance company. So we help, of course, organizations use intelligent automation to modernize their operations. We do training, consulting to educate said organizations on doing it themselves. Intelligent automation.
Very interesting. I want to learn more about that because I love AI. Obviously, that's part of our business. So I'm very intrigued by what you're doing. Why don't we jump in with kind of the first question on client retention? When we talk about customer retention, a lot of times it just sounds like a numbers game, right? How has retention evolved just beyond keeping customers from leaving?
Yeah, so of course, everyone is familiar, well, at least most people are familiar with CSAT and NPS and all these metrics that we normally gather, from feedback surveys, that you can find online or on websites directly. So that is still very much in play. That is not obsolete. What really is happening right now, however, is a deeper contextual interaction, right? Which kind of mirrors what we see happening with Gen AI systems and essentially, gathering more kind of day-to-day feedback, more interactions, right, with customers. What we're doing is trying to focus more on contextual engagement, right? So there's other metrics now that come into play. So if you're talking about, so the way we look at it, of course, is when you talk about customers, there are external customers and there's internal customers. Your internal customers are your employees. We want to look at our organization in a way in which we treat external customers pretty much the same way we do internal customers, right? And vice versa. So the idea essentially is that if we do a good job, with recruitment and retention, chances are we're going to do a good job with recruitment and retention of external customers, right? So in our company at Abundant, we kind of view them as really one and the same. So that if we do a really good job of recruitment and retention of staff, employees, that tends to also mirror our capability or ability to do the same for external customers. What approach that we're taking.
We've had this topic on probably a dozen or so podcasts now, and you were the first to bring up the internal customer viewpoint of how we treat our employees. It builds the culture, which then drives how we treat our external clients. So really solid points there. I love that. So, customers today are expecting more than just good products and services. What changes in expectations are you seeing? Because you primarily are B2B, correct?
Yeah, I would say we're 80% B2B, yes.
Okay. So what are some of the expectations you're seeing from other businesses, and how have you had to adjust your strategy to meet those new expectations?
Clients nowadays are more demanding. Uh, it's always about ROI and value for money and all that stuff, all that rhetoric. Now that was true in the past, but it's much more true today. And I think that really comes down to cost efficiency, operational efficiency. Maybe there's an expectation that Gen AI can alleviate a lot of the cost burden, and maybe also increase productivity, by a certain percentage or whatever. Now, of course, whether or not this is true, still remains to be seen. There have been plenty of studies, of course, released that are sometimes contradictory. Like the MIT study says 95% of Gen AI projects fail. Take that as you wish, as you will. But then there's other studies that indicate that there are huge gains to be had. Maybe not on the enterprise side, but more on the personal AI side, which is what we would normally call shadow AI, which is individuals just using it, for individual productivity tasks, right, at companies, right? Um, so the truth is somewhere in between, if you're a systems thinker, you'd say, okay, the truth is somewhere in between there. So I kind of gravitate towards, yes, the truth is somewhere in between. Um, so companies essentially may have expectations that may be grandiose, or they may not be so grandiose. But I think that our job is essentially to manage those expectations. So what we've seen in recent years is expectation management is really a core competency that companies need to have, right? They need to kind of balance, goals with realistic outcomes, right? And really taking a look at companies, their staff, their capabilities. What is it that is actually achievable within the timeframes that they've laid out? So I think that has really come to the fore, in recent years. Yeah.
Yeah, I think expectation management's huge, right? If you don't have those tough conversations up front, then everyone's going to be disappointed at some point along the journey. So it's better to just have those expectations clearly defined up front and keep that communication consistent and flowing throughout the process. I think that definitely helps. Obviously you're heavily involved with AI and automation. How are you seeing AI change the landscape in terms of what customers are expecting out of other businesses that they're partnering with?
There's a couple things here. One thing is that customers want to integrate, intelligent automation. So, AI, MLDL with LLM. So they want to combine traditional machine learning with all this newfangled, agentic AI stuff, right? So it's kind of like a spectrum. We can consider like traditional machine learning systems on one end, right, and agentic AI on the opposite end. So if we have like fully autonomous, systems on this end, and very kind of rigid, rules-based systems on this end, what they're really looking for is, how do I figure out, what do I need, from this spectrum, number one. And number two, how do I integrate all that together with my current systems to get something that actually saves me money and increases productivity, right? So that is like the main challenge that companies are facing. And, sometimes they just don't know, what kind of steps they need to take to get to that goal. Sometimes they're taken away by, the hype, and they may be focusing a lot on agentic AI when in most use cases, it's not necessary, right? So we really need to examine, what is it that they actually need, and then make the proper recommendations. So that's, what our company, I think, really excels at, is, finding, what applications within that spectrum are actually necessary for them to achieve their goals. So just as an example, if let's say you're a manufacturing company, right, and you're focused, let's say, on preventative maintenance, on defect, checking and improvements to, those two things, right? Would you install an agentic AI system there? Like, maybe not, right? So we would really have to take a look at your particular use case before we actually lay out a plan, right? And that may be different from finance. Like, let's say your wealth management, or even like travel agency. You want to do AI within a travel agency, right? So each use case is really distinct, and the recommendations we make would be different, of course. Yeah.
Right, customized to their needs. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. What are some just recommendations you have for other business leaders out there related to adapting AI within their businesses, and if they haven't even started to do it yet, right? Like, where should they start, and what should they be thinking about to make sure that they don't get left behind in the future?
Okay, that's a great question. I'm going to answer the last one first. So, what should they do to make sure they're not left behind, right? Like basically, this is about what kind of blogs and YouTube channels or whatever they should subscribe to. So, I'm a big fan of Medium, right? So definitely subscribe to Medium.com. Yeah. And just and then just subscribe to the particular topics that are of interest to you, right? So all the Gen AI stuff, agentic stuff. If you do that, you're pretty much caught up every day. Every day in your email, you get it, and you know what's going on, right? And a lot of the articles may be very relevant to what you need to do, right? There's a very high relevancy score with Medium.com. So in fact, I mean, if in about half of the cases, I just use that. The second stuff is of course YouTubers and bloggers who are and people you can follow on Twitter or whatever, who are the luminaries, right? The Jan LeCuns of the world, the Andre Karpathis of the world, the Andrew Ungs of the world. So you want to know like who are the thought leaders within that space, and make sure you subscribe to them. And I think that by itself that's sufficient.
Right.
For the first part of the question, what should you be doing? Of course, it's a pretty trite expression, but yeah, go after the low hanging fruit. So go after the stuff that is the easiest to do, but the biggest bang for the buck, right? So if it's like in my business, the easiest thing to do for me in my business was trainer onboarding. So how could we kind of make that process better, and alleviate a lot of the operational burden? And so for that, we just said, okay, obviously the trainers would do the same stuff as before. They'd fill out the form, but this time the AI would assign them courses, and then of course schedule intakes for them based on their schedule, right? And then advertise their intakes and all that stuff. So normally that would be done by a bunch of staff, but because that's not very hard to implement, that is the low-hanging fruit, and that saved us, ridiculous amount of money and time, So definitely going after like the biggest bang for the buck.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, and every company has that. That you have to onboard at some point if you're growing your company. I've seen that go just so disorganized, right, and inefficient. So to be able to automate it and make sure everyone's being trained the same way as well, so exactly what they're being taught up front. I love it. I think it's really needed out there. Even in the large Fortune 500 companies, they don't get onboarding right. Yeah, absolutely. There's a ton of opportunity for that. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I think this was really interesting to hear your insights on this. I really appreciated you reflecting on your internal employees and how they're considered your clients first. And I think that really kind of paints the picture of what kind of culture you have there. So thank you for that. Anything you'd like to say to close us out to promote your company?
Yeah, I mean, for those of you who are interested in intelligent automation, right, and you're confused how to do it and get it right, just get in touch with us. So you can, of course, go to abundant.com, or you can email us at info@abundant.com. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tarun, and best of luck to you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Take care.
Yeah, take